Full and effective institutions committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information is at macfound.org.
This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. On the local news roundup, forecasters tell us to get ready for a major winter weather event this weekend.
I would be prepared for a big winter storm with ice. Ice.
North Carolina is already under a state of emergency, and we have the details on how to prepare and an update on what to expect. In both North and South Carolina, flu deaths are on the rise, and in the Palmetto State, measles cases continue to multiply, raising the possibility of a spread to our state.
We have communities with very low vaccination coverage rates.
In fact, it has arrived. We'll talk about that. Mecklenburg County conducts its annual point-in-time survey of our homeless population. 2 former city council members joined forces as lobbyists. And Charlotte's Carolina Migrant Network sues ICE over tracking device records. Here to talk about those stories and more is WFAE climate reporter Zachary Turner. Saenz is a reporter for WSOC-TV. Mary Ramsey is back with us. She's local government accountability reporter for the Charlotte Observer. And David Hodges is an investigative reporter for WBTV. Welcome, everybody. By all indications, a winter storm, the worst in 20 years, is headed our way for the weekend. North Carolina Emergency Management Director Will Ray put it this way at a news briefing yesterday.
Confidence in the forecast continues to increase that this will be a significant event covering most of the state.
So we start with WCNC Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich for the latest. We just heard you say it, Brad. Expect ice, 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 ice. I may have left one out. That's worse than snow. How much are you anticipating we're going to get?
Yeah, unfortunately, Mike, it's too much. I mean, sometimes we get caught up in the specific totals, but there's kind of this threshold for ice that we look for, and it's a 1/4 inch of ice accumulation. That's that kind of magic threshold of weight on tree branches and power lines where we start to see problems with those. And we're certainly going to see more than that. And there's an outside chance it could be close to a 1/2 inch, or in some spots 3/4 of an inch. And that starts putting you in pretty rare territory for ice storms where you have crippling effects. Now, the million-dollar question is, where does the heaviest ice fall? It's going to be a narrow corridor from the upstate of South Carolina through Charlotte and maybe up towards Raleigh. And as you know, that's the biggest population corridor, the I-85 corridor. And if the heaviest stuff falls there, you have the most infrastructure to be impacted by that ice. So power outages would be extensive. So yeah, a lot of people get excited for snow here in the Carolinas. And I know going into this, people were looking at their phone apps and seeing all this snow. Never really was going to be all snow. It was going to be a mix. And as we went through the week, it trended more towards the dreaded ice. And the thing about this, Mike, it's been a while. We've been at least 10 years since we've had 3 inches of snow, sleet, or ice at all. And it's been 20 years since we've had a significant ice storm. So a lot of folks are new to the area. People that have lived here may forgot about what winter weather's like. So this is all leading to kind of the anticipation and prep that we're trying to get people ready for something we haven't seen in quite some time.
So it's going to be raining on and off today, most of the day. But when do you think it's going to begin?
So the big change in the last, I'd say 36 hours has been, it's slowing down. So I think that's actually a little bit of a good news situation because preparation during the week is hard if people have work in school, right? So this will give people a chunk of Saturday if they're off to get prepared for the storm. It's going to happen late Saturday. I'm thinking dinner time right now would be when things start to ramp up. And it will start as sleet initially. So sleet is the actual frozen pellets. It hits the ground. It's very loud. You probably have all experienced it. You know when it's sleeting because you can hear it. It bounces all over the place. That will happen Saturday night. At some point overnight while we're sleeping into Sunday morning, it's going to transition to freezing rain. And I think most of Sunday is going to be freezing rain. And that's when I expect the worst of the conditions Sunday and then into Sunday night and even into Monday. Even as the system moves out, this isn't a typical Carolina storm where it's actually warm and sunny after. It's going to be brutally cold after this system. So whatever falls is going to stay frozen and on ice everywhere on trees and power lines for probably days because the temperature stays below freezing for extended periods of time, at least through the middle of next week.
So clarify something. Sleet is kind of not as dangerous as the freezing rain because it's already frozen. Is that right? And then the
Yeah,
freezing rain
so
comes down as rain and then freezes.
yeah, exactly, Mike. I think everybody should be rooting for sleet. Sleet is already frozen. It bounces around. It's a piece of ice. Now, it's not great for travel. It's probably the worst scenario for the roads, but it's a much better scenario for the power lines because it's already frozen on the way down. It can't stick to the power lines and tree branches. It just bounces off. It just deflects and falls to the ground and causes issues on the streets. Rain, freezing rain, falls actually as liquid. It would be the equivalent of going out on a cold morning with your hose and just spraying everything with water and then letting it freeze on that stuff. And that's what freezing rain does. So it coats everything in a layer of ice. And so in this case, yeah, we really do want more sleet. You won't be going anywhere, but at least you'll have power.
In the past, when Charlotte's gotten Arctic air from up north and then moisture moving in from the Gulf of Mexico, that's when we've gotten these ice storms. Is that what's happening this time?
Yeah, Arctic air is pretty shallow. It's dense in air, so it hugs the ground. And because we have the Appalachian Mountains, that cold air gets trapped against the mountains and between the mountains and the Piedmont out to the coastal plain. And what happens when this storm forms over the Gulf, it throws warm, humid air back north, which is more buoyant and less dense. It rises up and over that cold layer at the surface. And so in this event, Mike, it'll be 25, 24 degrees down here at the ground, but up at 5,000 feet, it could be 40 or 43 degrees. And that's why it's rain above our heads falling into colder air at the surface.
So it's been 20 years, I think, since Charlotte last experienced what we would call a crippling ice storm, and it was a pretty bad storm. It was December 2002. 24 people died in that storm. Over 200 hospitalizations were associated with it. And yesterday, you made a social media video post, which we heard a piece of a moment ago, in which you say conditions being set up for the weekend are a little different than they were 20 years ago. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? How are they different?
A little bit of both. So when that event happened, I was actually here for my interview for my job at WCNC, staying in a hotel with power. Nobody at the station had power. I think half the station showered at my hotel room at the time because they didn't have hot water. But what was interesting, this was like the first couple days of December. And in the Carolinas in early December, there's still some leaves left over on the trees because they haven't all come down. There was a big surface area on the trees to hold ice. So that really put a lot of weight on it. Also being early December, it had just been the first cold blast. So the ground was warm. And so the roads were actually just wet with that event. All the ice was up in the trees and power lines. And you could actually drive around on wet roads. The problem was so many trees and power lines were down that you couldn't get around. They were blocking the streets. This go around, much colder setup, which means we're likely going to see a lot more ice accumulation on the road surfaces and the trees and power lines. But we'll have to see because there's less leaf and foliage in the trees right now. It probably will take a little bit more ice to cause the same type of issues. So a little bit different of a situation, and the ice was more in the central part of the state. But it has kind of eerily similar scenario to that. And for folks that don't remember, Hugo used to be the storm of record for tree and power line damage, probably up until Helene, and then back then up into this ice storm. This ice storm actually created more power outages and more tree damage than Hugo, showing that ice storms really can do a lot of damage in the Carolinas.
And the power was out in some locations back then for a couple of weeks. People can't cook. They don't have heat in their homes. Many of those 200 hospitalizations that I referred to a little while ago were due to carbon monoxide poisoning because people were trying to electrify their homes and they put the generators in the house, and that there's, of course, exhaust from those generators. Don't do that. They brought in charcoal grills to cook. Don't do that. Don't even use your gas oven to heat the house because there are evidently carbon monoxide fumes that come from that. Is it going to be that bad this time? Because you're talking about 3/4 of an inch of ice or more, and that's when power lines start coming down.
Yeah, and that event had about 3/4 of an inch of ice, just to put it in perspective. That was the total. The difference back then, too, the coldest temperature during that event was 28 degrees. This event might be 20 degrees. So that actually, I mean, it sounds horrible, Mike, but that actually might mean more sleet because it's that cold. You could refreeze the raindrops before they reach the surface. So that's what we're kind of hoping for in this setup. Now, if it's going to be similar, we don't know. The grid is different. Our population is different. A lot of technology's changed. During that event, Mike, there was a big push to bury power lines. Not everybody has those, but there was a big push after that event. There also was a lot of legislation and ordinances passed for carbon monoxide detectors on every level of your home because of all the carbon monoxide deaths after that. So that storm actually had a pretty big impact on a lot of our lives here that people don't even realize. To say that it's going to be the same, I don't think so. I'm a big proponent of all storms are different. Because for that event, there probably were people that got really bad conditions, others that didn't. That thing could be completely flipped around for those same people this go around. So it's really hard to compare events, but I think from an outage standpoint and damage, that's the one you kind of use as a gauge.
So people are worried about power outages for obvious reasons. They're also worried about damage from the ice to trees. How much ice will cause tree damage? Here's Charlotte City arborist Lori Reed.
So when we get over about a 1/4 inch of ice on those branches, the small twigs, they will break. Once you start getting up to a 1/2 inch and greater, you're going to get larger branches that are going to start to break. If a tree has any kind of root issues, if it sits on there for a long period of time and we get winds, we could potentially get whole tree failures as well.
And we're going to get some winds, evidently. I read yesterday, Brad, that we may experience 25-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Are you still seeing that?
Yeah, and it doesn't take much wind because when the tree is that weighted down, you just need a pretty stiff breeze to bring them down. And, the thing also we've got to remember is, I think will be more for Western North Carolina. There's still a lot of tree damage from Helene, trees that have been partially damaged by wind before that could be susceptible to ice at a lower threshold. And when I was talking with some of the state emergency officials yesterday, a lot of the power infrastructure in the western part of the state hasn't been hardened for ice. It was repaired quickly after Helene with somewhat temporary, less hardened infrastructure that might be more susceptible to ice than it normally would be.
I want to pass along some descriptions of what we may be experiencing the next couple of days, because the more dire this sounds, perhaps I'll jinx it and we won't get any of it. Let's just see. Let's just see. AccuWeather, if you'll pardon the expression, describes this as a rare high-impact storm for the South. And your colleague at WCNC-TV, Chris Mulcahy, says the last time he was this passionate talking about a forecast was the Monday before Helene. He says, I'm being straight up with you. This could be one of the most historic ice storms to hit Charlotte in modern history. That sounds scary. You agree with him?
I mean, modern history, yeah, just because of the time span. I think that's what we want people to do. Normally, like I said, Mike, with snow, I think how the mindset of a Charlottean is for snow. It's a little crazy. It's usually way overblown for actually the impacts. And honestly, for me, snow is usually a fun event to forecast because outside of staying home for maybe one day, you get to play in it. It's fun. It kind of reminds you as being a kid. Ice has none of that. It has all the horrible things that winter weather can bring. You can't play in it. You can't make a snowball. And it causes really, really big destruction. So to me, it's more relatable to like a severe weather event where you're forecasting a hurricane, a flood, or tornadoes. It's not the fun of winter weather. And that's been the hardest part to communicate, honestly, because people think of the fun part of the winter. When these things happen, they have not thought about the negative, horrible parts of winter weather, which is this. And I will mention, Mike, too, it's just not us in the Carolinas. This stretches from Texas all the way to Virginia. So a lot of the country is going to be impacted by this.
And covers most of North Carolina. And of course, with ice, you can't drive. And we'll come back and talk about the state of emergency the governor has already declared, and get a couple more details from Brad Panovich about what to expect this weekend and how long we'll have to endure this. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE.
On the next Charlotte Talks, drones. Once the toys of hobbyists or weapons used by the military, they're now working their way into new uses. Police departments across the state have turned to drones as first responders. Winston-Salem started 7 years ago, and now CMPD is considering their use for rapid deployment in emergencies. We look at the capabilities of drones, their increasing use, and the concerns that come with that. That's Monday morning at 9.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. Immigration agents recently detained a construction worker in Phoenix for several hours, an experience that Peter Yazzie cannot forget.
I still see their faces. If I hear a door open, my first instinct, I look up or I'm waiting for that knock at the window.
He's a U.S. citizen and a member of the Navajo Nation. Next time on Here and Now.
Join us later today at noon for Here and Now on WFAE.
Newsworthy, WFAE's daily news podcast, brings you not just the news, but the voices of our community. Our news team curates stories that reflect the diverse fabric of our region, highlighting local heroes, pressing issues, and unique perspectives. Every morning, you'll stay updated on the latest developments while gaining insight into the stories that matter most. Don't miss out. Subscribe to Newsworthy today, wherever you get your podcasts.
It's Charlotte Talks on the local news roundup on 90.7 WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. Governor Stein has declared a state of emergency. He did so midweek, well in advance of the storm even forming, so that officials could make adequate preparations. You can't drive on ice, but our city is still preparing the roads.
We're fully stocked with salt across the department. We have 5,000 tons on hand. Spread across our various facilities. We also have salt orders on standby in the event we need to replenish.
Charlotte Deputy Street Superintendent Alfred Oyoyo, he says more than 30 city trucks began spreading salt and brine on city streets yesterday, but Governor Josh Stein held a briefing on the state's preparations and had these words of caution.
Let me repeat this. Starting Saturday, please do everything you can to stay off the roads. Unless you're a first responder or essential personnel, please don't drive unless you have to drive. Fortunately, we have 2 days to make sure that we have everything we need to ride out the storm. Don't wait until it's too late. And if as you're getting ready, don't forget to check on your loved ones and neighbors and anyone who might be especially vulnerable, including the elderly.
So, Brad, this ice storm could make driving treacherous, if not impossible, and because temperatures are going to be so low for a long period of time, this could hang around for days. How many days?
Yeah, that is the question. I'm thinking through at least midweek, because when you look behind the system on Monday night, here's the thing, like there could be a little rain at the end, which I think is probably not going to happen. But even if it did, let's say at the very end, we got a couple hours of just good old fashioned rain and it's like 33 degrees. As soon as we go into Sunday night, a couple hours later, we would have a flash freeze as the Arctic air moves in. We drop to 24 degrees Sunday night into Monday morning. Monday, if there's ice and sleet on the ground, one of the effects that has, even if it's not a lot, it helps keep the air cooler, and we might never get above freezing during the day Monday. And then this is the brutally cold. Monday night, Tuesday morning, there's an outside chance we could see temperatures in the single digits. So we're talking like 5-6 degrees for a morning low. And then Tuesday, maybe we get to 35 for an hour or two, and then back in the teens. So by Wednesday, is probably the first time we get to like 40 degrees at the afternoon with some sunshine. So from a melting standpoint, there's not going to be a lot of melting going on with this until Wednesday. And so that's just from a melting standpoint. Let's say, Mike, there are power outages. That means people would be without power with temperatures in the single digits and teens at night, and high temperatures only barely in the low to mid 30s. So this could be a really big problem if there's widespread outages.
How do you adequately prepare for the lack of heat for 4 days with temperatures in the teens and single digits?
That is hard, because as good as your house is insulated, most houses here in the South aren't insulated that well, certainly for not that type of weather. The best thing I could tell you is have adequate backup heating sources. And you mentioned that storm in 2002. The biggest danger and deaths and fatalities and everything happened after the storm, because people are trying to stay warm in their house and try to cook by using devices and heating sources that weren't adequate for indoor use. So you have to have a safe one. The other thing you can do is keep your house as insulated as possible, keep the doors shut, the windows covered, use blankets. You might have to wear clothes. I always tell people there's a difference between being dangerous and being uncomfortable. It could be uncomfortably cold in your house, but if you keep it in the 50s, I know that sounds really cold to a lot of people, at least that's going to keep you safe. So there are ways to do that. You just got to be willing to have the winter gear on while you're in your house.
WCNC TV Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich, thank you for the good news. Thanks for joining us this morning.
I know. I feel like I'm always the people that see me all over the place, only when bad things happen. That's not a great vibe.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it very much. Have a good one. We're here with Zachary Turner. He's our climate reporter with WFAE. Mary Ramsey is a local government accountability reporter for the Charlotte Observer. David Hodges, an investigative reporter for WBTV, and Hunter Saenz, a reporter for WSOC-TV. I don't know who can answer this question, if any of you can, but I know that Charlotte is opening Emergency Operations Center for the weekend so that they can better coordinate efforts between various agencies. But what about shelters for the homeless? What about places to go for people if we do have these days on end stretches of no power and therefore no heat? What about those folks? Are there places they can go? And if so, how do they get there if you can't drive in the ice? Does anybody have an answer to that question?
I know that we do have some volunteer organizations like Roof Above that offer some services and beds for people where they can go and stay. And I know that generally the city of Charlotte will open up public transit for folks that are looking to get to emergency services or shelters when we have events like extreme weather, whether that is extreme cold, like we're going to see this weekend, or if it's extreme heat, like we see during the summer.
Yeah, but again, if you can't drive on the ice and we get three-quarters of an inch to an inch of ice on the roads, you can't drive on that. What about emergency vehicles? Will they be able to respond to people who find themselves in dire straits?
Yeah, medics spoke with us just yesterday about this. It's always dangerous for them, especially when they have to stop for an emergency on the side of the road. The more cars that are out there, the more likely there's the chance, unfortunately, for a pileup crash to happen to endanger people on the side of the road. They brought up to our Katie Solt that despite this crazy ice storm happening, there are still moms who are going to have babies and there's going to be other emergencies. So the more other vehicles there are on the road, the less likely it is they'll be able to help those situations out on time.
Well, on to more news, and it's not any better than the news we've been talking about because we've been watching this measles outbreak in South Carolina since October. Spartanburg for months has been the locus of this, and the cases are multiplying quickly. Last week we talked about there being 434 cases reported there. This week that number stands at 558. Most of the people who have been impacted by this are unvaccinated for the measles. Vaccination eliminates the threat. It's been going on for years. Get the vaccine. When this started, the outbreak appeared to be concentrated among private schools, and those students were then quarantined. And now it has arrived here in Mecklenburg County. The Public Health Department is investigating, 2 confirmed cases? Is that right, David?
Yeah, we've got 2 confirmed cases in Mecklenburg County. One is an adult who came into contact with someone who was traveling, and then there was also a child who was unvaccinated, and they had been in contact with the child from Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is where most of this outbreak is happening, and is also the area of South Carolina where there are the greatest number of religious exemptions for vaccinations. So, the more contact we have with that area, more likely spread will happen here.
Yeah, the new health director, the temporary health director, because Dr. Raynard Washington left, I think, beginning of last week to go to New Jersey and be grand poobah of health in that state under their new governor. But Dr. Kimberly Scott says with measles cases, no confirmed, there are confirmed cases in Mecklenburg County. Now confirmed in Mecklenburg County, we encourage everyone to get up to date on the vaccine to protect their health and that of the community. And meanwhile, the state's epidemiologist, Zach Moore, told WUNC that he is particularly concerned about western North Carolina, where they have the lowest vaccination rate.
The embers from that fire in the South Carolina outbreak have started landing here in North Carolina. And unfortunately, we have a lot of dry tinder, meaning that we have communities with very low vaccination coverage rates.
So you need a 95% vaccination rate to achieve immunity that prevents the widespread of measles. State officials estimate that every elementary school in Clay, Graham, Henderson, Polk, and Transylvania counties falls short of that number, and just about every elementary school in Buncombe, Cherokee, and Lincoln counties falls short. Do we know what the vaccination rate in Mecklenburg County is among school children?
Yeah, so my colleague Caitlin McGlade at The Observer actually just did some really great reporting on this, going school by school. Mecklenburg County's rates tend to be a little bit higher than those counties you just mentioned, pretty close to that herd immunity threshold. There are some that fall slightly below, but not as intensive of a situation as some of those counties that you mentioned to our west.
Meanwhile, the flu is causing problems. We have a rising number of deaths from the flu. It's been higher than normal. What is the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services reporting about flu deaths in our state? Who can talk about that? Let's see here.
I got you there, Mike. If you want, we got around 70 flu deaths in South Carolina and 181 deaths in North Carolina is the most recent figure I've seen from the North Carolina dashboard. It's already a way worse flu season than last year, which has prompted a lot of public officials to recommend to folks you can still get your vaccines. You still have an opportunity before the height of flu season in February to get vaccinated and perhaps mitigate serious illness.
Well, is it worse because the flu shot, they have to develop the flu shot in anticipation of a flu season, not knowing exactly which strain is going to be prevalent. And they do it, they guess. It's a guessing game.
Yeah.
Sometimes the shot is not as effective. Is that what's going on here, or is it that people are not getting the shot?
It is true that this year, it is so bad because we have this new flu strain that has appeared, it has evolved, and we haven't seen this particular strain in a number of years, which means people's natural immunity or immunity from getting flu in past seasons isn't really going to apply. But you can still get a vaccine, and it will still help you reduce the chance of it becoming a severe illness that leads to hospitalization, even if this is, not the specific strain that they guessed.
Hunter.
What's also unique about this strain is it seems to be hitting a little bit earlier than our normal flu season really ramped up and what we're used to seeing. On a personal note, my husband works in the ER, and I can tell you every single night around the supper table when I'm asking how was work, it's flu. That is the majority of what they are seeing in all of our ERs around the Charlotte area and around the state probably.
And aside from Tamiflu, what can they do? I didn't mean to rhyme, but it rhymes.
Tamiflu is a good start. However, I will say Tylenol works, resting, and just sadly waiting it out. Of course, doctors will tell you if you really start to feel like you can't breathe or you're just really feeling like, I hate to say it, but death, then go in. But remember that at the peak of flu seasons, just similar to the peak of COVID, when COVID was hitting, it does put a pretty big stretch on our hospital systems when it comes to beds and stuff. We don't have that much capacity as people think.
So getting back to the weather for just a second, because Brad Panovich from WCNC-TV in our chat box just posted a very scary looking map. He also says that ice storm warnings have just been issued for a few extra counties, including Lancaster in South Carolina. So if you're listening to us there, be aware that you're in the path of this winter storm that's going to be here by tomorrow. Mecklenburg County conducted its annual point-in-time count to assess the state of homelessness. Zach, explain how this works.
Oh, yes, this is an annual review that we have volunteers going out in the county to survey or out into the city to see how many people are living out in the streets, who are spending the nights out on the streets. And this is, we have a kind of, I guess, a coalition of people going out that are doing multiple surveys, up to 400 different surveys, going around and checking in on people that are staying in tents, that are sleeping on park benches, and kind of getting a count of how many folks are experiencing homelessness in the city.
And the people who go out on this count are volunteers, and evidently they had a large number of participants this year. Karima Gray, who works at Johnson C. Smith University, was one of them.
It's a way to just give back to the community and help out. Understanding homelessness and why people are homeless is very important, and this is a way to help do that.
So last year, the number of homeless people was higher than the year before. And though we don't have this year's numbers yet, one of the leading indicators would have to be the Roof Above shelter. Liz Clayson-Kelly oversees their operations.
What we've seen at the front doors of Roof Above is an increase in homelessness. I think from the community, we hear a lot of reports that people feel unsheltered homelessness is more visible. It seems to be increasing. So those indications tell me I think it would go up.
So when these volunteers hit the street to count these people, are they just going up and down Tryon Street and other places that are known where people, where homeless people spend their time? Are they going to shelters to count them? Are they venturing into wooded areas and under highway overpasses to count these individuals?
Yeah, it's worth noting that Roof Above, this organization, does do regular checkups on unhoused people. So they are familiar with this community and they know where people are staying in some of these encampments. So that's a good question. They're not just sticking to uptown Charlotte and places where homelessness might be more visible, but they do have an established rapport with people that are experiencing homelessness and will check in on those encampments.
So last year, 444 people experienced unsheltered homelessness, 60 more than the previous year. And of course, these are only estimates and are considered the minimum number of people experiencing homelessness. Do they know what drove last year's increase, and did they anticipate those conditions to be part of this year's count?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue that's driven by housing access and supply. As long as rent in the city continues to climb and affordable housing isn't keeping up with demand, this is an issue that will only get better when the city creates more affordable housing. It seems like the volunteers who are conducting the survey are anticipating that numbers are going to be higher this year. I mean, there's already been that indication, as we heard from that quote, that homelessness is people are feeling like this is an increasingly visible problem in the city. People are seeing a lot of folks out on the streets. So
444 people represents only the number of people who are unsheltered. When you add in all the people who are homeless at any given time in Charlotte, I think the last count was in October. It was estimated at 2,300. The latest point in time count took place on Wednesday night. We don't have the actual numbers, and we won't have them until about May. Marianne Priester, who oversees the count for Mecklenburg County, explains why it takes so long.
We take all of the data. We have to first look at what we've collected in our app. Then we have to compare it to our homeless management information system. We also do those observations. Frontline staff come together and conference those observations to try to identify people, because we're not allowed to include them in the count if we can't identify and deduplicate. So it's this kind of very tedious and ornery process for us to be able to get the data to a point where we have confidence that it represents an unduplicated number and accurate assessment of the number of people that were homeless on pit night.
Pit night is the point in time count night. Last year, volunteers conducting the count found a homeless person had died, and sadly, the same proved to be true this year. What do we know about that, Zach?
Yeah, last year they found 52-year-old Abdul Wright in Uptown, I believe, and then this year they found somebody else who had died, I believe, near I-77 and Woodlawn Road.
And Roof Above's Nicole Ayers was with the group of volunteers that found that deceased individual.
It's devastating. The homeless services work just sometimes shatters your heart, and today's one of those days that it's just really hard work. We say that, especially in extreme weather, it's life and death for people, and it truly is life and death for people who are experiencing homelessness.
So I have 10 seconds, Zach. What happens to these numbers? Are they just census numbers, or do we actually formulate policy as a result? I have 10 seconds.
Yeah, best hope is that this is going to drive increased funding for the city and the county to help address this issue of people experiencing homelessness.
Okay, we found some good news. We'll talk about that when we come back. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE.
Coming up in 20 minutes, ICE is continuing its Minnesota crackdown. The Department of Justice said in a recent court filing that Elon Musk's Doge team may have accessed private and off-limits Social Security data. And the House Oversight Committee voted to hold Hillary and Bill Clinton in contempt. All of that and more next time on 1A, coming up at 10 o'clock.
On Tuesday evening, February 3rd, WFAE, in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, will host a forum with the candidates for Mecklenburg County Sheriff. It'll take place at 7 p.m. at the WFAE Center for Civic and Community Engagement in Uptown Charlotte. Charlotte Talks host Mike Collins will moderate the conversation with all 4 candidates running for the position in the upcoming Democratic primary. The event is free to attend, but registration is required. Visit WFAE.org/events to learn more.
It's easy to take important things for granted when they're free, but the money has to come from somewhere. If you're a regular WFAE listener, consider taking the next step. Become a sustaining member. If not for you, then for a neighbor who relies on our news but can't contribute. By paying it forward, you're helping keep this essential service moving forward. Join today by making a donation of support at WFAE.org. Thank you.
It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFAE.org. I'm Mike Collins. We're here with Zachary Turner, our climate reporter for WFAE News. Hunter Saenz is a reporter for WSOC-TV. David Hodges, investigative reporter for WBTV. And Mary Ramsey's with us. She's the local government accountability reporter for the Charlotte Observer. Mary, I know you recall that Republican Tariq Bokhari gave up his seat on city council to take a job in the Trump administration. He was there for about 5 months and then came home. But now he and another former council member, Democrat Larkin Eggleston, have joined forces. What are they up to?
Yes, so the two are teaming up to launch a new lobbying operation here in Charlotte. It's going to be a new Charlotte branch of a firm called the Southern Group. It's a Florida-based lobbying operation that also has offices in Raleigh and Columbia and some other cities throughout the Southeast. Not their first enterprise together. The two actually co-hosted a podcast during their time together on the Charlotte City Council. So they'll be working primarily, it sounds like, with a lot of businesses in and around Charlotte, helping them to get their way in the door with local, state, and federal government.
These guys appear to me to be, I know both of them, and they appear to be unlikely friends, not just because they are a Republican and a Democrat, and a pretty conservative Republican and a fairly liberal Democrat, but because they don't strike you as people who would grab a beer together, and they do, and they have for years. So is this a consulting, and that bodes well for our country, that this can happen in this political environment. But are they lobbyists or are they merely consultants?
So they will be leading this lobbying office. So I would assume, without having, talked to them both in great detail about the specifics, that they'll be pretty involved here. And I agree. I know both of them as well. A little bit of an odd couple, but opposites attract. So we'll see what they're able to do and who they start picking up as clients.
So the North Carolina League of Conservation Voters puts out a scorecard every year tallying state legislators' environmental voting records. And this year, a local member of the General Assembly is on their naughty list.
One of our adversaries is Representative Carla Cunningham from Charlotte, whose environmental record says she does not care about the environment of her constituents.
That's the organization's Director of Public Affairs, Dan Crawford. Zach, you spoke with him. Why do they feel that Carla Cunningham doesn't care about the environment?
Yeah, I think a main reason for that is her vote to override Governor Stein's veto on a particularly divisive piece of energy legislation last year. This is Senate Bill 266 that was named the Power Bill Reduction Act, although there is a lot of dispute about whether that's what it will actually do. At its heart, it's a bill that eliminated North Carolina's interim climate target, which was this goal of reducing our carbon pollution by 70% of our 2005 levels by 2030. It also made it easier for Duke, a little bit less expensive, or it gives them the ability to recover capital financing costs on some of these larger projects like nuclear reactors.
So, David, why would Democrats vote against helping the environment and changing our carbon emissions target reduction rate by 2030? Why would they do that?
Well, one thing that my past reporting and research has shown specifically about Representative Carla Cunningham is that of all the Democrats who serve in the North Carolina General Assembly, she has received the most money from the North Carolina Home Builders Association and also its education fund. And, I talk with Republicans in the General Assembly who I've asked for interviews, who have recently pushed me to try and interview Representative Cunningham for various stories. I can't tell you how bizarre that is to me because I've never had a Republican in Raleigh before tell me go interview a Democrat in Charlotte about a subject. So she's incredibly important to this kind of faux supermajority they have in the House of Representatives in Raleigh. And I know Democrats in Charlotte have been talking about primarying her for quite a while now.
Governor Stein originally vetoed this bill, saying that it sent, quote, the wrong signal to businesses that want to be part of our clean energy economy, adding that it would also raise rates by increasing our reliance on natural gas. And you report that Cunningham, Majid, and Willingham, that Shelley Willingham from Edgecombe County, and I guess we should mention his name, Majid Rashid, who's from here, and I got it wrong. It's say it for me. Nasif Majid. There we go. They're all in contested primaries coming up in March. Will this play a role in the outcome of those primaries, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely could. And to continue what I was referring to earlier, I mean, the other names on the list of Democrats who receive the most money from the Home Builders Association in North Carolina include Shelley Willingham and Nasif Majid. So, and because of that, they have received assignments in Raleigh that are extremely helpful and influential. Carla Cunningham is part of the vice chair group of the oversight committee that will be grilling Charlotte officials next week, including Sheriff Gary McFadden. So, playing ball with Republicans is working out for them in some instances in Raleigh.
There's also been a little bit of blowback for, I guess, Cunningham. One of her opponents right now is community activist and Baptist minister Rodney Sadler, who received Stein's endorsement already. So we're starting to see a little bit of, backlash from her own party.
So the local immigrant advocacy group, Carolina Migrant Network, has filed a lawsuit, Mary, against ICE over their device tracking policy. What's this about?
Yeah, so this actually dates back to 2025. The Washington Post reported last year on ICE's increased use of ankle monitors for folks, and Carolina Migrant Network filed some Freedom of Information Act requests to get more information on ICE's policies surrounding these tracking devices. They are now suing ICE, saying that the agency is illegally withholding those public records. They're joined by a DC-based immigrant rights group in that suit. So not directly related to what we've seen here in Charlotte with ICE and Border Patrol, but dating back to some of these broader policy shifts we've seen in immigration during the Trump administration.
Yeah, and they say it's part of a pattern of behavior of the agency defying public records laws. Of course, that's part of their defying of law. It seems to be a pattern of behavior that we're witnessing roll out across the country, particularly in Minneapolis right now. Wherever data centers have been built, wherever they are operating, electric rates have tended to rise, and now Governor Stein has teamed up with federal officials to put pressure on data centers to pay their own power bill, pay their own freight. When industries other than data centers that require enormous amounts of power come online, who pays for that? Is this particularly to the data centers, or does this happen when any big industry moves into an area and needs more power? Do we all pay for it?
It's not a new question necessarily. That's why we have different rate classes. Industrial consumers of energy aren't paying the same rates that residential or commercial customers are.
Why not?
Because ideally these rates are structured to allocate costs properly. You're supposed to be paying for what you're using, or like something relative to the amount of energy that you're using. For example, since industrial customers aren't really using that distribution system that residential customers are using, that's not really factored into their rates. But since all of us residential users in our neighborhoods require all of these distribution centers to get energy from a power plant to our homes, that ends up getting factored into our rate, which Duke will say is why residential rates are a little bit higher. What's different about data centers than other industrial users now is this huge sort of AI, I guess, boom, or some are calling it a bubble, where we're seeing a lot of these projects being announced. A lot of them are making their way into these utilities economic development pipelines, and each one of these data centers has is an enormous potential consumer of energy, taking up as much energy as some nuclear reactors produce.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question one more time, and I know there's no answer to it, but we all have meters on our house, and they certainly have meters on these data centers. Why don't they just pay what they owe? Why spread the pain?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it comes down to the opportunity here to offer them economic incentives to come here, because they can be a huge source of tax revenue. In the same way that you might give money to a builder to build in a particular location, there's a chance that folks are offering them a good, deal to come here so that we can get that tax revenue.
So we spoke briefly last week about the case of the pantsless mayor in Mooresville. This became known to us because a former employee of the town filed a lawsuit against the town, claiming he was retaliated against after discovering this surveillance video of the mayor wandering through the halls late at night without pants. But now we have the man behind the scene with us, David Hodges, who has been doggedly investigating this. Tell me about this.
They call me investigative reporter for a reason, Mike. I appreciate it. Right. So yes, you're right. This lawsuit happened last week with this former employee. He says he came across this video while investigating why the mayor had swiped into town hall late at night, saw it, reported it to his supervisors, was investigated and retaliated against, eventually forced to leave the town. WBTV has been trying to get this video for more than a year. I interviewed the mayor way back in December of 2024 when we got records showing that he was at town hall, that police had arrived, that he was with another woman who was being paid with taxpayer dollars. He said we wouldn't really see very much on the video. We wanted them to prove it. So in June of last year, we filed a lawsuit to get this video. This week, we just filed what's called a motion for summary judgment. We're basically asking a judge to look at the case, see that all the facts say that this should be a public record, and release it to us. Hopefully, we will be seeing or getting this video and finding out who's right in this situation sometime in February or March, if we're lucky.
So what has the mayor had to say, Mayor Carney had to say about these allegations and the revelation that this guy has filed the suit and the fact that you guys want the tape?
So when I previously interviewed him about trying to get this video, he said he would just leave it up to the town's lawyers. I will note that Mayor Carney has got his own attorney, and when we requested to depose him on the record, his attorney filed a motion to quash that deposition, saying that we were doing it just to embarrass him. He has not responded to my request for comments since this new lawsuit has come out. I know he spoke with the Observer, I believe, and said something along the lines that the truth will come out soon enough, and it's not as, I believe, like salacious as what people are making it out to be.
Speaking of video, there's also video from a security camera of a break-in at the home of the late Greg Biffle. His entire family died in a plane crash back in December, and on January 7th, his home was broken into. David, what else do we know about that?
Yeah, so the Iredell County Sheriff's Office released this footage, which you could see on WBTV.com or any of the places you get news in the Charlotte area. And it shows what appears to be a woman going from room to room inside the house. It appears the house was actually equipped with security cameras all throughout it, but you can't tell exactly who it is. So the Iredell County Sheriff's Office, they haven't made an arrest. They're asking for tips. They're saying, and according to the incident report, that $30,000 in cash was taken, NASCAR memorabilia, as well as 2 Glock handguns. So they're asking for anybody to provide information who might have it.
And there's a pretty clear shot, a facial shot of the individual who is involved in this on the tape. So maybe that when they release that tape and it becomes more heavily circulated, people will be able to come forward. There was an incident of anti-Semitism locally. These have been reported all over the country right now. And Charlotte's Shalom Park was targeted in this one. Shalom Park is part of that campus on Providence Road that houses 3 different Jewish houses of worship and the Levine Community Center and a day school. Hunter, what happened?
So parents basically got to school dropping their kids off, and it's my understanding alerted security after at least nearby one of the schools and one of the Holocaust remembrance memorial sites there on that 54-acre lot. There were signs that had swastikas and then threatened to hang people and urged people to join their local Nazi organization. Police, of course, were called and are investigating how this happened. What I thought was also very supportive and interesting is that Chief Estella Patterson actually called the executive team there at Shalom Park and told them personally that we would boost patrols there. But of course, it just puts everybody on edge. And thankfully, right now, a lot of people are coming around to support the Jewish community where this happened.
I want to bring us around to the big story that we'll be facing this weekend. Brad Panovich, chief meteorologist with WCNC-TV, is still with us. And Brad, for those who did not hear us in the beginning, who are just joining us now at the end, what do you anticipate this weekend will be like?
Well, a lot happened during the show, Mike. The ice storm warnings probably went out on all your phones, but pretty much the whole area is under an ice storm warning now, which is pretty rare. We don't normally see ice storm warnings because that means it's primarily ice. Usually when there's a mix, it's a winter storm warning. And the totals have kind of hovered around that 1/2 inch and high end 3/4 inch. So if your phone was buzzing or you saw a lot of crawls going across all the TV screens, it's because now we're under ice storm warning. And Mike, I actually was trying to look back the last time Mecklenburg County was under ice storm warning. My database only goes back about 20 years and I couldn't find one. So it probably is that 2002 event, the last time we had an ice storm warning in Mecklenburg County. So pretty rare to see that issued for the Charlotte metro area. And we're in that 24-hour to 36-hour window where people definitely have to be prepared right now. I have a solar system at home. I'm hearing you guys talk about power was kind of interesting. During the show, my system automatically activated storage in my power wall because it saw the ice storm warning. So even my automated power system is saying, hey, you need to start backing up power for the weekend.
So give me your address because I'm coming over on Sunday.
I think my neighbors already know. They're like, we're coming to your house.
Yeah.
Dibs on a shower.
That's exactly
that.
Yeah.
So this
I got
is
my
all
Venmo
scheduled
on the front door. Don't worry.
This is all scheduled to begin as sleet sometime Saturday afternoon, correct?
Yeah, and I think overnight, tomorrow night, like Saturday morning, that's when the ice really picks up. And Sunday looks to be the worst of the icing. So the ice storm warning goes basically from 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon to 1 o'clock Monday afternoon to kind of give you the scope of the system.
And because we are anticipating a significant amount of ice, we can anticipate power outages. We can anticipate trees and tree limbs being down. So if you have an opportunity to stock up on food, on ways to heat your home, ways to stay safe today and early tomorrow are the times to do that, because after that, the roads may become impassable for several days. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, and that's like I said earlier, I think the good thing about it slowing down, it's going to give people most of the daylight hours on Saturday to make those preparations they maybe didn't do this week. Though I would not be a person to be at Costco or Walmart or Lowe's this weekend. That probably sounds pretty brutal right now. It's already bad on a Saturday. I can't imagine tomorrow.
Brad Panovich, the chief meteorologist for WCNC-TV. He joined us along with Hunter Saenz from WSOC-TV, David Hodges from WBTV, Mary Ramsey from the Charlotte Observer, and our own Zach Turner, climate reporter for WFAE News. Thank you all for the hour.
Charlotte Talks is a production